welcome back to episode 2 or part 2 of this weird form of royal love series where we discover the weirdness but also the humanity of two of the most controversial figures in British royal history, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. In part 1 we ended with King George V's death, and for part 2, well, we're pretty much just gonna pick up right where we left off with the proclamation of a new king, Edward VIII. Did becoming king curb his weirdness, I wonder? Let's find out. (1936) was quite a tumultuous year for both Edward and Wallis, but I would dare say more so Wallis than Edward, at least based on the letters that we will be looking at today. If you recall from part 1, we read out a few letters where Wallis was basically the boss, the mommy, telling Edward what kinds of foods to put out and that he's such a good little boy. Well, that was before the man was proclaimed king, so did she change her tune? Just a little bit at least. When that happened? Based on this first letter from 1936 that we have on record, I'd say so. I am sad because I miss you, and being near and yet so far seems most unfair. Someday, of course, I must learn to be always alone, for I will be in my heart. But also perhaps both of us will cease to want what is hardest to have and be content with the simple way. God bless you, and above all, make you strong where you have been weak. I send flowers to him. A few things stand out to me here, which are, I suppose, a little bit strange or weird when it comes to at least Wallis's usually bossy tone. This letter reads to me as a lot more sentimental, deferential, and even wistful. But more importantly, this line here, perhaps both of us will cease to want what is hardest to have and be content with the simple way, tells me that she was referring to marriage, which we know from part 1, Edward already made clear to her that 1936 was the year that they would be made into one, joined as one. But Wallis was pretty much silent, at least in her letters, with regards to this hint at marriage. And so to me, either she didn't take it seriously or we just don't have a written record of what she thought of the entire situation. But this letter, this sentence tells me that, not only was she taking him seriously, but it sounds like she wanted the same thing, at least at this point early on in February of 1936. What we know about Wallis is largely based on how history has painted her. We've learned a little bit more about her personally through her memoirs, which we've covered on this channel. Check out the playlist up here if you're interested. But what's even more incredible is these letters give us a lot more insight into how the world actually saw Wallis at the time. In a letter that she wrote to her Aunt Bessie on the 30th of January of 1936, she tells her aunt that, quote, I am implored on all sides not to leave him, the king, as he is so dependent on me, and I am considered to be a good influence, believe it or not, and right in the things I try to influence him to do. She carries on and says, I am up to my neck in people all wanting more than ever to be friends, and the days or the nights haven't been left open for days. Everyone is over anxious to see that I am asked to all small dinners in the official world, all sending messages via me. Isn't it all funny and strange too? I'm just the same, however, and enjoying it all as a huge game, laughing a lot inside and controlling my tongue and sense of humor on the outside. So she was belle of the ball. She put in this odd request to Aunt Bessie on the 1st of February 1936. Dearest Aunt B, I forgot to say in my letter that I would like one of those family tree things of the Warfield family and one of the Montagues. I know they are rather expensive to have done, but I feel I should like to have them. I hope the histories of the two will stand up against these 1066 families here. So she's asking for a document of her lineage, her ancestry, the family tree, and she hopes it stands up to the 1066, these royal types in England. Was she perhaps already prepping for the upcoming nuptials? Was she hoping that she would in fact be crowned as queen? Aunt Bessie seemed to be just as confused because despite not having her response, we can gather from Wallis's response that she had asked her, to what end? And Wallis explained, it is only in case some old court official wanted to know this and that. And all English families have that sort of thing. And we think it's a good thing to have in reserve. Was she telling the truth? Would you buy the story if you were Aunt Bessie and that was the response you got? Or do you think there was more going on in Wallis's mind than she wanted to let on? Next, we get Edward's first letter on record after becoming king.
Hello, my sweetheart. How are you? Missing a boy, I hope? Hurry here, please, as a boy is longing to see a girl and will be all set and waiting at 5:30. Enum, David says more and more.
Still weird, even though he's king. In a subsequent undated letter, he says, Good morning, dear kind
Wallis. Please say you are sorry for that impulsive gesture of throwing us so far into David's shoes. We both feel very hurt and sore. Please put us back on our chairs where we belong. And David says for you to come down quickly. Your loving babies.
I'm so confused. But I guess Wallis was into that weirdness because her response is once again uncharacteristically loving. I can't believe anything so lovely could be given to a girl. I can't ever make you know how spoiled I feel. I only hope I can make you feel that I'm always loving you, working for and with you, and wanting everyone to realize the really fair person David is. I am your Wallis. And then written on the envelope, bring my yellow... I read this in preparing for this episode and it's still making me crack up. Bring my yellow dog. How am I going to say this? Bring my yellow dog to me, please, sir. As we get into the spring of 1936, Wallis finally comes clean to her aunt about the state of her marriage to Ernest. Without going through the letters in detail, she tells her basically it's irretrievable at this point, our relationship. I'm gonna have to move out. He's in love with Mary. You might all remember Mary. She was a good friend of Wallis until Ernest started having an affair with her because, well, Wallis was with the king. And so she tells Aunt Bessie he's in love with Mary, and she found out that they're having an affair, an illicit affair behind her back. Funnily enough, she also recommends Mary as a future bride for Ernest. Now, I don't know if this was all part of the plan. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there was this huge, detailed divorce plan that I think Edward whipped up with Ernest, where Ernest would be caught in bed with Mary, thereby giving Wallis the legal grounds for a divorce, which is exactly what ended up happening, spoiler alert. But it's interesting that Wallis was like, you know what, she'd make a good wife for him, actually, because that is what ended up happening. Another thing that piqued my interest, though, nestled in these letters like it's nothing, just a matter of fact, was Wallis mentioning a weekend where, amongst other people, one von Ribbentrop was present, as was the German ambassador at the time. Now, for those of you who tuned into my Sussex-Windsor Files series, where we covered The Traitor King, the book by Andrew Loney, or if you're otherwise very much aware of the Wallis and Edward Nazi story, then this would be a huge red flag, wouldn't it? Because the whole story there was Wallis and von Ribbentrop had, if not an affair, at least some kind of a relationship, some kind of a friendship. And while this doesn't prove anything per se, they were definitely running in the same circles. Next, we come across a couple of notes from Edward to Wallis. The first one says, Good morning, my sweetheart.
How is your pain? Our boy has overdone the drazzle, but he's hurrying down to a girl. How tired one is of people. They are exhausting. What shall we do today? More and more and more. David.
And then some more weird third-person narratives.
They say that they like this bracelet and that they want you to wear it always in the evening. They have told Mr. Van Cleef, but are very sad they can't make Christian all right tonight. A boy loves a girl more and more and more.
And I'm only bringing up this next letter from the 6th of June because he says, make ooh. What does that even mean? Finally, as we creep into summer, June of 1936, Edward sends Wallis this incredibly interesting letter, which backs up the belief, the theory, that Edward was so gung-ho about marrying Wallis, he himself told Ernest, "You're going to divorce her. She's mine." On the 5th of June of 1936, Edward wrote,
"Oh, my sweetheart, it is so sad to return here without you. Hurry back quickly, please. And I know you will, as you must feel how much you are wanted and missed back here."
At this point in time, Wallis was in Paris, so, he was missing her.
"You have been away far too long, and you mustn't ever go away again. My talk with Ernest was difficult this evening, but I must get after him now or he won't move. It's so unsatisfactory until it's all settled, and we really are one. I know you will approve of Alan's plan, but of course won't do a thing until we can discuss it. It's the only way.
And George Allen was a lawyer who the king was working with to facilitate Wallis's divorce, or at least get advice about it. The summer of 1936 was, I suppose, life-changing, to say the least, because that was the summer that all hell broke loose in terms of the publicity that Wallis and Edward attracted. But before we get to that, Wallis's name was already in circulation because the court circular would publish the names of people who were attending certain events with the king. And Wallis's name appeared twice that summer. First on the 28th of May, alongside Ernest's name, so they still attended as a couple. And this was for a dinner that the king had hosted at York House, and it included the likes of Stanley Baldwin, the prime minister. But then the second time, which was on the 9th of July, Ernest's name was nowhere to be seen. It was Wallis by herself when she attended a dinner, yet again hosted by the king at York House, which is, by the way, where he was living temporarily until his mother moved out of Buckingham Palace. Now, I'm not sure how popular the court circular was at the time in terms of public readership. Were members of the public keeping an eye on this? Don't know. However, I don't doubt that there were certain eyebrows in certain circles of England that were being raised. And amongst all this, the weirdness of Wallis and Edward continues. On the 12th of June, Edward writes, "Your enum dog." I just can't keep a straight face when they spell dog like that. "Andrew David, thank you for the Buick ride.
And say we are missing you terribly and holding you very tight indeed. More and more, always, sweetheart."
And then Wallis responds, but this is undated, still on morning paper, "David, you were sweet and dear to an ill girl last night. I am off to the doctor at 2:30, have arranged for this evening with a scene, but shall expect you at 8:15 as to make early drowsel. My love for you, Wallis." Then he sends her a set of 4 good morning and good night notes while they were staying at somebody else's home. So the first one, which was written on the 27th of June 1936, Edward says, "My sweetheart,
this is to say good night, and God bless wee Wallis. He will be missing her as much as we will be each other. Goodness me, what a big house and what a lot of people."
And this is the part that got me.
"Tell Mary to send a message when you are ready in the morning, as I'll be scared to go down without you. A boy is holding you so very, very tight always. More and more, my beloved, your David."
The king of, at the time, not just the United Kingdom, but the empire, was too scared to go down all by himself for breakfast. Then they go off on the Nolan trip. Now, because they were together, I suppose, all the time on that trip, we don't really have any notes, or at least no surviving notes, between the two of them. Wallis wrote her Aunt Bessie a few times, just telling her about her holiday and how hot it was, and also about how people were clamoring around the king everywhere they went. So it makes you wonder if she was expecting some publicity, because at least the king was certainly making a show of himself, but to what extent, whether they both knew that the Nolan trip would basically be it, the trip that sealed the deal, that sealed their fate, again, I suppose we'll never know, but something tells me, at least in terms of Wallis's letters to her aunt, she really didn't have a clue. After the conclusion of the Nolan trip, Edward and Wallis separated. So Edward had to go back to the UK and Wallis went off to Paris, to her favorite hotel, the Hôtel Meurice, if that's how you pronounce it. Which is clearly a favorite of hers. I mean, can you blame her? But while she was there, she came down with a terrible cold and received a barrage of mail from her friends and family in the United States, filled with newspaper clippings, photographs of their holiday aboard the Nolan. Now, this is what appeared to be breaking point for Wallis. We also were told of this in her memoirs. And I say this based on this letter that she had penned on the 16th of September, 1936 in Paris, while she was still in bed nursing her cold. Note how different the tone of this letter is in comparison to what she told Aunt Bessie about how she's ready to leave Ernest. It's over. Dear David, this is a difficult letter to write, but I feel it is easier than talking and less painful. I must really return to Ernest for a great many reasons, which please be patient and read. The first being because we are so awfully congenial and understand getting on together very well, which is really an art in marriage. True, we are poor and unable to do the attractive, amusing things in life, which I must confess I do love and enjoy. Also, the possession of beautiful things is thrilling to me and much appreciated. But weighed against a calm, congenial life, I choose the latter. For I know that though I shall suffer greatly now, I shall be a happier, calmer old lady. I know Ernest and have the deepest affection and respect for him. I feel I am better with him than with you, and so you must understand. I am sure, dear David, that in a few months your life will run again as it did before and without my nagging. We have had lovely, beautiful times together, and I thank God for them and know that you will go on with your job doing it better and in a more dignified manner each year. That would please me so. I am sure you and I would only create disaster together. I shall always read all about you, believing only half, and you will know I want you to be happy. I feel sure I can't make you so, and I honestly don't think you can me. I am sure that after this letter you will realize that no human being could assume this responsibility, and it would be most unfair to make things harder for me by seeing me. Goodbye, we all say. Now, as you can imagine, Edward did not receive this letter well. Apparently, she had called him, or maybe he called her, but they spoke over the telephone that same night, and she repeated what she had relayed in the letter. And so Edward writes her a response that same night from Fort Belvedere. Good night, my Wallis.
Why do you say such hard things to David on the telephone sometimes? Hard things like you would prefer to have someone else with you tonight when you were sick, that I would be bored, that I don't understand you, and lots of others which hurt me so, and show that lack of faith and confidence in me, which makes me so terribly unhappy. I'm so sad tonight, sweetheart, for this and other reasons. First of all, that you feel so ill, and that I'm not there to look after you. Then that I won't see you before I go to Balmoral, and not knowing when you will join me there. Oh, please make it quickly, my darling, because every moment we are separated is a sad and lonely one. You see, I do love you so entirely, and in every way, Wallis. Madly, tenderly, adoringly, and with admiration and such confidence. I feel like bursting tonight with love, and such a longing to hold you tighter than I ever have before. Please try and trust me like you love me, and don't have any doubts. I promise you there is not the slightest reason to. She doesn't doubt him, so don't you doubt me.
Now, having the benefit of hindsight and being from the future, we already know that Wallis didn't, in fact, end up going back to Ernest. Upon her return to London, she had moved out of her home with him officially, but then, less than a month later, on the 14th of October, from a little cottage at Felixstowe, is that how you say it? Felixstowe? Where she was staying for her divorce proceedings, something which we talked about when we went through her memoirs. She writes him yet another letter where she appears to be backing away yet again. My dear, this is really more than you or I bargained for, this being haunted by the press. Do you feel you still want me to go ahead? As I feel it will hurt your popularity in the country. I hear you've been hissed in the cinema, that a man in a white tie refused to get up in the theater when they played God Save the King, and that in one place they added, and Mrs. Simpson. Really, David, darling, if I hurt you to this extent, isn't it best for me to steal quietly away? I am sorry to bother you, my darling, but I feel like an animal in a trap, and these two buzzards working me up over the way you are losing your popularity through me. Do please say what you think best for all concerned when you call me after reading this. Together, I suppose we are strong enough to face this mean world, but separated, I feel enum and scared for you, your safety, etc. Also, the hunters say I might easily have a brick thrown at my car. Hold me tight, please, David. 2 days later, on the 16th of October 1936, the king had over one Lord Beaverbrook, who was the influential proprietor of the Daily Express. And during that interview, the king asked him to please not report on anything other than a simple Mrs. Wallis Simpson receives divorce or granted divorce. And Lord Beaverbrook acquiesced. And now we arrive at the climax of the story, the abdication. We start off with a hastily written note from Wallis to Edward, where she complains that despite the media blackout, one Cavalcade magazine apparently didn't get the memo. They are selling Cavalcade in the streets of the city. Think of the harm among that class. Goddard says it is a libel. Something must be done at once. I hope your pain is better, and that soon we will be able to be happy, although now one's eyes are sad and worried. I long to be gay and open with everybody. Hiding is an awful life. If you're wondering what Cavalcade magazine published, well, it did what the US magazines were doing at the time, printing photographs from their holiday aboard the Nolan, in addition to speculation about their relationship. As stated by author Susan Williams in her book, The People's King, The True Story of the Abdication, in August 1936, readers of American newspapers and of the British Cavalcade gasped when they saw a photograph of the king and Wallis together on a little boat while on holiday in Yugoslavia. Wallis was tenderly touching Edward's left arm, and he, in an open-necked sports shirt, leant towards her attentively. Another point mentioned by Susan in her book I found incredibly interesting was the mathematician and code breaker Alan Turing, who in 1936 was only 24 years old and was a student at Princeton University in New Jersey, sent his mother in England some newspaper cuttings about Wallis Simpson. He wrote, "I don't suppose you have ever heard of her, but some days it has been front page stuff here." So it just gives you an idea of the extent of the media blackout. Alas, unfortunately, as the saying goes, all good things come to an end. And so did the media blackout in the UK, when on the 1st of December, the Bishop of Bradford openly criticized the king in a sermon over his need of divine grace. And for whatever reason, that unleashed the press. Wallis, who was already under severe stress and feeling quite sick, was removed by the king from London to Fort Belvedere along with her Aunt Bessie before the press unleashed, by the way. So she was already under a lot of pressure, and she seriously starts to panic while at the fort. And we know this based on 2 letters she sent her 2 best friends at the time. One, Sybil Colfax, and Foxy Gwynn. Dear Sybil, I am planning a clever means of escape. After a while, my name will be forgotten by the people, and only 2 people will suffer instead of a mass of people who aren't interested anyway in individual feelings, but only the workings of a system. I have decided to risk the result of leaving because it is an uncomfortable feeling to remain stopping in a house where the hostess has tired of you as a guest. I shall see you before I fold my tent. And then to Foxy, she says, everything is wrong and going more wrong, and I am so tired of it all. I think I shall remove myself when I am well enough for a small trip and give it all time to die down. Perhaps returning when that damn crown has been firmly placed. Interesting. So to Foxy, she says, I might come back once the king is crowned. But to Sybil, she makes it sound more permanent. There's a final letter that Wallis sends Edward right before the abdication when she is absolutely freaking out, beside herself. Please don't do it. People are going to blame me. I'm going to be the scapegoat. Everyone's going to hate me. Everyone already does. It's a really long letter. But in that letter, she tells him, just wait until you're crowned. Just wait 8 months. Let's get to next year's autumn, I think is what she was gunning for. And then maybe let's broach the topic of us being together again. But Again, being from the future, we all know that Edward wasn't having it. In his mind, it was a matter of now or never. And so on the 11th of December of 1936, Edward's infamous abdication speech aired.
That I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king without the help and support of the woman I love.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Well, not for us, because we still have a part 3, which covers the period between the aftermath of the abdication and the wedding, which took place in June of 1937. But that's it. Thank you all so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed this little piece of history, and I'll see you in part 2. Bye-bye. Let's move this microphone out of the way this time so I don't crush it like I crush souls. You sound like an Enum dog.